Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ian Mann, and I'm joined on our panel today with Mr. Kent Seelan and Mr. Harvey Diamond. The assessment department personnel is Mr. Abhishek Ratan, and the administrative personnel is Mr. Zachary Mohan. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all of the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 8 on our docket today. Mr. Mohan, will you please affirm both the assessor's and the applicant's testimony?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Mr. Assessor, please stand. Please state your full name.
Abhishek Ratan.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Stephen Charlebois Page.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Then we can commence, please, with number 1 on the list. I do note that it's a full docket today, and I would ask everyone to keep that in mind as we are proceeding through with 8 items. But if we could turn to the first matter, please, at street address of 610 Kildare Avenue East. Mr. Ratan, could you please introduce the property and provide your evidence?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-3417. Roll number 0900129400. Property address 610 Kildare Avenue East. The 2025 assessed value based on April 1, 2023 is $1.8 million. Its parcel uses CMVSR. Moving on to page 2, I have aerial photograph and the photograph of the subject property. It's at intersection of Kildare and Mariota Street. It's a coin car wash, pump, and a kiosk. Moving on to page 5, I have the income. On page 5 and page 6, I have 2 income streams that have been used to assess the subject property. The first income stream is for store kiosk, which is of 986 square feet. We have a table rent for $40.89 on it. We applied a vacancy loss of 2%, an expense of 3%, and a shortfall at $6 per square feet, which brings our net operating income to $38,209. Then we applied a cap rate of 4.65%, which brings the capitalized value as $881,699. There are some additional building values like pumps, canopies, which are based on a cost model that value at $338,000, bringing a total net income from this income stream at $1,160,000. Moving on to page 6, we have second income stream that was applied to the subject property. That's for vehicle car wash. which is 4,820 square feet. Rented out we used a table rent as $9, bringing the potential rent at 43,380. Applied a vacancy loss of 2%, expense of 3%, shortfall of $6 per square feet. This brings the net operating income as $40,659. We applied a cap rate of 6.35%, which brings the estimated value from this income approach at $640,000. Now, when we do a sum of income stream 1 and income stream 2, the total assessed value for the subject property comes at $1.8 million. Moving back to page number 4, I have some comparables for both the income streams. The first paragraph is for the store SKP, and we can see that my comparable number 1 to 3 range between 1,000 to 2,400 square feet range, and the mean of our current comparable comes to $43.40. For vehicle car wash, we only have 2 current comparables for them. The area ranges from 3,360 to 6,480 square feet, and the average rent for them is $11.75. Moving on to page numbers 10 to 12, I have the income and expense mailer that was sent back by the property owner to us. And from page 13 to the end, I have some photographs for my rent comparison. So to conclude, I would ask the board to confirm the 2025 assessed value at $1.8 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Charlebois Page, have you any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do. I also do have some rebuttal evidence. I don't know when you'd like me to address that, but would you like me to continue with my questions first?
Yes, please. We'll deal with your rebuttal evidence after your presentation and the questions on that. So we'll go through the assessors, questions for the assessor, then your presentation and questions, and then we'll deal with your rebuttal.
Okay, and in that line, that'll apply to all the other properties that are gas stations today. So I'll present on that, and I'd ask to just carry that forward in the interest of everyone's time and efficiency, if that's okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Great. I'll begin with my questions. So could I just confirm with you that the value presented today is a model generated value?
That is right.
You've included 3 lease deals for the convenience store portion of the property. Have you reviewed those lease deals?
One of the other assessors have reviewed those. I personally haven't reviewed them, but one of the teammates in our team has reviewed them.
So would these be considered net lease deals?
I would say yes, they should be net lease.
Is it, to your knowledge, is it typical for these lease deals to be more like pad lease deals, like land leases, or are these net lease deals like you would see in any retail property?
Sorry. So this should be a land lease. Typically, they are for the land leases. They go for an extensive period of time, so they should be land leases.
Sure. Okay. So with regards to comparable 2 there, which is going to be heard on this docket today, I see that it's commenced in 1995, I should say. Do you think that provides much relevance to an April 1st, 2023 valuation date?
Since, as we were talking earlier, these leases are for a longer period of time, so which are generally around 20 to 25 years and can even be extended. So that was one of the best leases that I could bring up to the table.
Did you survey gas station rents that are at other type of retail assets, or is this a search of standalone gas stations in the city of Winnipeg?
This should be a standalone assets.
Okay, because there are a number of gas stations located in anchored retail assets, but anyway, can move on from that. So does it concern you that comparable 2 being that old is an outlier at $51.22 a square foot?
I wouldn't say it would be so much concerning for me, because another comparable number 1 is at $44, right? Which is which is slightly lesser than the comparable number 2, but again, like $44 was signed on 2019. it shows that there is still a demand of that much rent in that area, right?
So when you stratify commercial rents in the city of Winnipeg, when I look at rents of 43, 44, 51, that would indicate to me that would be outside of the typical range. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't say that, because again, the list has been piled up by one of the assessors. I have, for me, like 43 and is pretty good rent comparable as compared to what we have assessed them at. We have assessed them at $40.89, using all the model-based data, right? So I would say this is good comparable in my eyes.
So these rents you've provided are for the convenience store portion of the subject property. Is that correct?
Yes, that is right.
Is it fair to say that these properties have much more than a convenience store in terms of offering from a commercial operation?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Can you please repeat that?
Have you netted these leases for the gas, canopy, pumps, any of the other operations on the site?
This is only for the store part and the gas related activities. It has the above paragraph that for my SKP comparables, it has nothing relation to vehicle car wash. So it is only for the gas related activities and the kiosk that they have inside.
Okay, so I'll address that more in my rebuttal, but I'll move on from that right now. In terms of the cap rate on this property, so if we'll turn to page, let's see, it's page 8 of your brief. There's a capitalization rate chart provided by the city of Winnipeg. Could you go ahead and indicate to me where this asset would fall in terms of the property type?
This is a so whenever we talk about kiosk, they offer a like gas pump and kiosk. They offer a variety of things. It is one of the mixed type units in our portfolio, which is kind of commercial for when you go for filling up the gas, but it also has a retail segment when you go and purchase some supplies from the store. Technically, we don't have any category in our cap rate study, and it's the same for other brokers too.
For the purposes of today's call, could I suggest that this would fall under the retail component if we were looking at these broad definitions?
Yeah, we can look at a retail, but again, the risk associated with a kiosk is so less than the standalone retail. I would conclude that.
Based on what? You don't mind me
Because anybody like the risk factors involved running a kiosk would be lesser when you compare it to a standalone retail shop.
What about a regional mall or something or a power center there? Something that's a blue chip asset in an investor's portfolio. You would indicate that a gas station would be superior to that asset?
Not superior, but would be, I know like a 4.65 cap is pretty low, which should be adjusted a bit.
Yes, it's an outlier for sure. Just from my review of the range there, I'm seeing from the brokerage firms, I'm seeing that they're saying between 6 and 7.5% is what they have. My review of top quality retail assets had me between 6.5 and 7, and this property is at 4.65, which would be a massive outlier to the data set.
Yeah, it should be adjusted a bit for sure. 4.65 is pretty low. I get it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, any questions?
Yes, you mentioned that the cap rate should be adjusted. What would you adjust the cap rate to?
I would say somewhere in the range from 5.5 to 6 should be a cap rate. Because 4.65 is technically too low, but it's an owner occupied gas station.
That's all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Diamond.
I don't have any questions that haven't been asked by already. So thank you, Mr. Mann.
I just have one follow-up from something that you said with respect to the 5.5 to the 6% cap rate, which would be the adjustment is that the adjustment you would be suggesting is appropriate here
Yes, I would say that would be something which is appropriate, yeah. And should be followed along, I guess, for all other dockets which we have today.
Okay,
Because I'm assuming and I'm pretty sure that it's a similar situation in every other docket that we have. So I would suggest like 5.5, something between 5.5 to 6% should be good.
okay, and I see the car wash here, you have a capitalization rate of 6.35%. Is there an adjustment to that as well, or is that cap
No,
rate?
That is good.
That cap rate is acceptable to you?
Yeah, yes, that is.
Okay, I don't have anything else, thank you. Mr. Charlebois Page, your evidence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So subject property is an owner-occupied gas station with a convenience store and car wash built in 92. There is a convenience store with 986 square feet in size, and a car wash is 4,820. There's the additional infrastructure associated with the gas pumps, tanks, and canopies, which are valued on the cost approach and added as an additive. Again, the assessment authority and I have both valued this property on a mix of income and cost approaches to value. Site area is 32,896 square feet, and the current assessment is $1.8 million in the commercial class. I'm going to focus in on my income approach. Obviously, there's the cost approach components based on the Marshall Swift valuation guide that I've mentioned. Those won't be in dispute today, but I do have some commentary to make on them. I'll begin with my rental inputs, which begin on page 12 of my report, or my income value begins on page 12 of my report. The easy one to start with is I don't dispute the car wash rent of $9. It's in line with the comparable I have on the next page of my brief at 1761 Pembina at $9 a square foot. The convenience store, I've reviewed sites with commercial stores at these gas stations. So on page, on the following page there, sorry, and I'm using my PDF pages. I've realized that my page numbering is gone, but for PDF page number 13, it's got my rent comparables on there. And you'll see comps that say C store only, and those are comparables around the city with just a commercial store. So I'm looking at comps 2, 10, 11, and 12, and you'll see they're noted there as small kiosk. So these are the smaller sort of gas stations, not dissimilar to the subject property. You'll see the leasable areas there, 500, 300, up to as big as 700. The rents ranging in those comps, they can be quite high when they get down real small. This one's north of 1,000. You start to get up into that convenience store mix. And so where you see C-store only, you'll see some of those ones at 1,336 square feet there at Osborne. It's $32.93 a square foot. For my valuation today, I have applied a $35 per square foot rent, and that's sort of to account for that one there at 1,300s at $32, and this one's slightly smaller, so I moved it up to $35, which I would consider to be a high-end commercial rent as well. So now for the vacancy shortfall and non-recoverable expense allowance, I've applied 2% vacancy, $6 per square foot shortfall, and 3% non-recoverable. That's all in line with what the current assessment is. I have reviewed the capitalization rate range for retail assets, and I've attached a supplemental report. I won't go into too much detail. I'll outline just quickly that macroeconomic factors heading into the valuation date, such as rising interest rates, that's a consideration to an investor going into the valuation date there. So our review of top retail assets, top quality retail assets, which are typically anchored or have a good tenant mix and good access in a commercial hub. That range there is 6.5% to 7%. This type of asset, though it's a standalone gas station, predominantly if we looked across the mix of these, they'd be in strong locations and good performing retail assets. So I think that's obviously the best place to look for there. And your neighborhood shopping centers, your regional shopping centers, your power centers, they will have these. So typically signed on a pad lease like the assessor and I had discussed. So like I said, I've applied a 6.75% in this range, or in this case. The only reason I went up from the 6.5 is the age of this one is a 92 build. And you'll note that this type of an asset, like a car dealership or a fast food chain, will have keep their business up to date. So they'll have new signage and have certain things that they have to keep up on in terms of branding and look. But this one's a bit older, so I went up a quarter point from the 6.5, which I've applied in many cases today. My reconciliation of value is 1,425,000 rounded. It's included down on, they're separated out by car wash and commercial store. I have not separated these two. I've only separated the two in terms of rent, but in terms of a capitalization rate, this would sell as one asset. So I would just finalize by saying I'm not in any case today going to be disputing the adjustments made. The assessment authorities used Marshall Swift, the valuation guide for the pumps and tanks and all the canopies and associated stuff for the gas business. And in my opinion, they've done a correct job of that. So that concludes my presentation. Again, my proposed revised value is 1,425,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rattan, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Mr. Steven, I would like you to go on your rent comparables. Mention again on page 12, as per you, I guess, or I don't have the page number, unfortunately. So
yeah, sorry, it's page 12 of the PDF,
yeah.
I believe. Yeah. Okay.
And I actually checked that you and I have exactly two of the comparables are exactly the same.
Sure.
705 and 120. But I see there is a difference between the square footages and the table rents. Can you please tell us why there is a difference between both of the two things?
So all I can say is that the information sourced from this chart would come from a financial document from the owner or a tenant, I guess it could be, that we represent. So that figure on line item 7 would come from a financial document.
Okay, because do you think like this is going to make some adjustments in the net rent that we both have?
It could. I don't think, from my perspective, though, it would slide much. I think these commercial stores, if you look at, a high-end sort of commercial rent for a prime tenant, between $30 and $40 triple net would be sufficient and good locations. So I don't think that'd sway my opinion. There's other rents in there for commercial stores at these locations, and I truthfully think that the model, if you want my honest opinion, the model has exaggerated both the rent and the capitalization rates on all of these properties.
Because the rent that we have in our comparable is directly derived from the income and expense bill that's submitted by the property owner or the representative. So that 43.99 is directly coming from their adjustments done already, right? So
yeah, I guess it might be different. Are you speaking about your brief here?
I'm speaking about when I'm comparing your comparable to our comparable. So that was because that is going to make difference when you calculate the comparable net, and it is going to reflect that in your chart.
Yeah, I'm unsure though if so you'll see in my rebuttal. I think one of the problems with your rent comps here is maybe this is better. Could I suggest that we maybe deal with this as soon as my rebuttal comes out? Because I'll show you sort of my opinion on the rent comps you've used, and with specific reference to comp 2, how that should be netted down. But maybe we could explore that further.
I think that makes sense. Right now, we're just getting into a debate without the evidence of the rebuttal in front. So,
yes.
Mr. Rattan, if you can continue with questions on the presentation and the brief that Mr. Charlebois Page has filed, then we'll get to the rebuttal later.
That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Diamond.
Yes, Mr. Page, I'm again looking at your page 13 and the comparables.
Yes.
And I note that there's really a huge discrepancy. You have a rent as high as $159.61 per foot and as low as $14.51. So that's quite a discrepancy. Would you acknowledge?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
from that, you'd see the size of that comp you're talking about at that
Yeah.
$300 a square foot. So,
Absolutely. So we have here under 1,000 square feet, but close to 1,000 square feet.
yep.
Correct. And so I'm looking at your, well, for example, your number 2 for 700 square feet is $85.71. And if you look at your number 10 for 500 square feet, it's $80.
Correct.
And your number 11 for, it's a really small one, 200 square feet is almost $160. And number 12 for over 2,000 square feet, though 540
No,
square
it's 500.
540 square feet is $92. So the smaller ones like this one have higher rents than the larger ones. For example, your top one is 389 or 3,096 square feet at 2438, but size, basically you have an economies of scale.
Yeah,
And
but and
really
then also
expensive.
also I think one thing that's going to be really throwing this off is these sites have a cost approach value done on them. Again, this I'm about to go through this in my rebuttal, but I'll try and answer this the best I can. Is that on these sites, right? This owner is buying a section of the property, or in this case, is owning the outright. But in some of these cases, they'll own it a pad on a larger property. They're going to set up the gas canopies, the pumps, the tanks, and then they're going to have a small convenience store that could range from, like you said, 200. It could be a kiosk, like some of the Domo comps we'll see later are 150 to 200 square feet, scaling up to, let's say, 3,000 to 4,000 square feet. In some of these cases, the problem is if you don't net out what the gas canopy and if you don't net that out of the income, you're applying a direct income from an entire asset that includes the gas station to the small convenience store. And it's a tough exercise because the lease deals never break it out, right? They're never going to say, here's the gas tanks, canopies, and the land that's infrastructure towards that. And here's the commercial store that we run that's 1,000 square feet. So in many cases, they're paying this annual rent, and the store itself, is you'll see some of these rents that look exorbitant on these small kiosks. But again, I'll touch on this more in my rebuttal. But if you look there at Comp 7, you'll see 1,336 square feet there for $33. I do agree with you. The small ones can get into a pretty aggressive sort of kiosk rent. But there is that consideration to be made. If this was a 7-Eleven at the corner or a, what have you, a similar asset, a similar convenience store in a commercial spot that was strictly on the corner across the street and had no gas station, would the rent for that convenience store likely be between $30 and $40 a square foot? I would say so.
Okay, I just referred to your evidence. That's why, you take me somewhere, but I'm just referring to what you have actually given us to consider.
For sure. And this is the broad spectrum of what exists. And in terms of that economies of scale, I think that's what I would respond.
Okay, well, you've answered my question. I don't have any others. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
A question with respect to the cap rate that you've selected, the 6.75%. You're treating these as as a retail from your study. Is that fair to say? Is that correct?
I think yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. But there are some significant differences in the type of retail this would be as opposed to, as you said earlier, strip mall or anchored strip mall or something like, or along those lines. These are almost a character unto themselves.
Correct.
Okay.
But I would say this. I would say so obviously if we had sales of any individual like specific subset of an asset, it'd be perfect to derive a cap rate. The reason I've chosen retail cap rate is because some of these assets will be pads within anchored retail assets within the city of Winnipeg. So that those sales of the larger retail assets would best represent, I guess, the durability of this income stream. That's, they've sold as part of larger retail assets, and that's why I've chosen that type.
Sure, and the durability of a retail stream could dictate a lower cap rate because of the stability of it. Is that not? Isn't that true?
I'm sorry. So I've chosen the top quality retail from my study, the range of 6.5 to 7. That's based on the sales that we've reviewed and that are obviously that are available within a relevant time period. So again, I've chosen at the bottom end of my range for these properties because I do think that typically they'll be in good commercial hubs. And but to answer your question in terms of these 4 caps and low 5 caps, I do not think that that's reflective of a commercial cap rate in the city of Winnipeg.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further. Now, you indicated that you have some rebuttal evidence. Mr. Mohan, has that been distributed?
I'll do that right now, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you.
I have a physical copy for the assessor right inside, just a moment. And then I'll distribute it to the panel right now.
Thank you. I'll refresh and.
Okay, just uploaded, so just another refresh and it should be apparent.
Yeah, I probably refreshed too soon. I better do it again.
Altus rebuttal PDF, is that?
Yep, that's the one, correct.
Great. Okay, I've got it. Mr. Diamond and Mr. Seelan, if you can let me know when you've got it, please.
Just looking for it here, sorry.
Okay,
Might be under just numbers, the orders, that might be where it is.
Just under orders?
Yeah, number 7 order, and then it should be right before item 1.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate the help.
Yeah, no problem.
I have it now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Diamond?
I've got it.
Great. Okay, Mr. Charlebois Page, can you please present your rebuttal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so this will be relevant to the 5 or 6 gas stations we have on the call today. 2 of the other properties are not quite gas stations; they're more mixed vehicle service garage units. So I'll just quickly take you through this. This is 1070 Henderson, which is comparable to in the assessor's analysis. It's on the docket again today. So if you'll see on page 2, there's the income and expense statement, and you'll see that the property rental revenue is $87,624. So at the bottom, I've drafted out there sort of, this is the way that the assessors calculated the rent is they've taken the PGI, the total PGI for that property, and they've divided it by just the convenience store on the property. So in my opinion, they're failing to adjust for the fact that there's fuel pumps, gas canopy, and all their gas related items on that site. And so if you see the valuation below, this is the city value for 1070 Henderson. And there's $834,000 in assessment applied to that, which is approximately, if you'll keep going down, 35% of the property's total value. So I would say that, this is not my, I don't think that the 95 deal should be in there. And I'm not sure that, I would follow this, but I would say if you were to use that deal, I think the methodology that I would follow is that you would have to net out the amount that's being added through the cost approach, or else you're saying, the total amount paid for the rent of the site is being applied to only a portion of the utility, which is the 1,685 square foot convenience store in this case. So I've sort of highlighted that below. If you're saying that 35% of the property value is being apportioned to the gas or the fuel pumps and that operation, only the portion relevant to the convenience store would be done. And I netted that deal out to 3364. Again, not to say that I would follow that on that deal in specific, but I just wanted to note that, when looking at these convenience stores on these properties, taking them by the total PGI for the site is not reflective of what the owner is paying for at that site. So that concludes my rebuttal.
Thank you. Mr. Rattan, have you any questions?
No, not at the moment, because, no.
Okay, Mr. Diamond, any questions on the rebuttal?
Well, I'd like to maybe to understand this better, so I want to make sure, because I think it's important. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I really follow exactly, but I think what you're saying is that the rent on the convenience store itself only accounts for some of the income, a good portion of it, I guess about 2/3 you're saying here.
Yeah.
And the rest is, you're saying, applied to the pumps and other facilities?
So yeah, and that'd be the idea, right? Is so if you were to own this site and you said, okay, I'm going to pay you, let's say $100,000, or let me just use the actuals. You're going to pay me $85,000 a year, or $87,000 a year to run a fuel pump and convenience store business, right? Like you're running a gas station, you've got a convenience store on there. For us to say, oh well, the convenience store is worth, $87,000 divided by 16. Whatever the 1685 square feet is disingenuous, because the truth is what you are renting there, that payment amount you're making for $87,000 includes the fuel pumps, the land associated with that, and that operation. So what I'm trying to get at here is, again, when you see some of those rents, and I think we've been talking about it in a number of different ways throughout this first property here, is that I just do want to highlight that the convenience stores are not 100% of the business here on this site, and we are adding in that cost approach additive. So just to be cognizant of that when we're calculating the rents.
Yeah, but in this case, there are two income streams, and there is a separate rental on the other that you agree with, the $9.
That's the car wash. That's not related. The additives. So if you see in the valuation, the additives are a separate component of that. I agreed with the car wash rent.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the actual, where you go to fuel up. That's sort of what I'm talking about.
Okay, so the fuel off is part of the business. Okay.
For sure.
But it is part of the income as well.
Yes, but in this case, we're using the cost approach to value it, right? And that's what I'm getting at is there's a cost approach to value being added on as a smack figure. And we're taking the total income and saying, well, just the convenience store is being calculated on that. The problem is you have to remove the cost value unless you did it all on the income approach. And that's what I'm getting at here. It's almost a double assessment to apply a cost approach to those, let's just call it all of the gas station infrastructure. And then in addition say, well, they rent it for $87,000. So that's the convenience store. And that's sort of what I'm getting at here.
Okay. And that's all very well, but then you've indicated that you agreed with the additional expense values.
For sure. I do agree that if you're going to do them on the cost approach, they are correct. The amount you've done is correct, but then you can't turn around and take the total amount of the rent and say that applies to the convenience store. That's the differential I'm making is that there's, you can, I don't disagree that those are best done on a cost approach, the tanks and canopies and all that. I'm not disputing those figures either. They're done through Marshall Swift and they're done correctly in my opinion. Yeah. Just if you'll, I think I've sort of gotten at that point here is that 100% of the income for the property is not applied to just the convenience store. So some kind of netting would have to be done to that figure, or it's not a correct, I guess, application.
Okay, and I don't know if this is relevant, but I'm going to ask you because I know that in these type of leases and instances, and this one happens to be with Shell, that as part of the lease arrangement with the owner of the station, the canopies and pumps and all those improvements are paid for by Shell. Is that not correct?
So I'm unsure. I don't have the lease that inform. I don't have the business sort of arrangement between the owner and that. Again, they are valued for the purpose of property tax, and again, that application is correct here. But sorry, to be specific with you, I do not have that lease agreement or that business
Okay, yeah,
relationship.
that went back to my, yeah. Okay, in all fairness, I went back to my experience when I was a practicing lawyer and I represented people and negotiated these leases with Esso and Shell and places like that.
Okay.
I think that unless the situation has changed since then, that was the arrangement. But anyway, thank you very much. I think you've clarified it better for me. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, questions?
Sure. So are you saying that the total adjusted value that the city is putting on here, which they put on in this particular case of 338,000, is that what we're talking about here when you're talking about that the value is too high?
Yeah, no, and sorry, I'm not saying that value is too high. I'm in agreement for this docket that the cost approach, you'll see them as adjustments on all of the valuation sheets. Those are for the canopies, pumps, all the stuff associated with the gas station component of the subject property. What the rebuttal is getting at is for 1070 Henderson. The assessor has taken $87,624, which is the top line item, the potential gross income for the property, and said, well, the convenience store at 1,685 square feet is going to be, you're going to divide 87,624 by 1,685. That's the income that the convenience store is generating. I'm saying that that's not the case. They are paying 87,624 for their gas business that also has a convenience store on it. And what I did here was attempt to show if you remove that adjustment, that gas station portion from the total, and you say, hey, well, 65% of this property is the convenience store income, you would have to make that adjustment to the total rent because there is a gas station business being run here. Just because it's being valued on the cost approach doesn't mean that the full income value that the owner is paying in rent should be applied to a convenience store. And that's, I hope I've articulated that well.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I think I've got the rebuttal focuses on the comparable that the assessor has used in order to buttress the rents that were produced by the model. Your position, and please correct me if I'm wrong, your position is that the rent assigned should be $35 per square foot of the kiosk, of the convenience store, as opposed to the $40.89 that the model and the assessor are advancing. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Okay, good. Then I have nothing further. I think I've got that clear. Mr. Rattan, have you any summary?
No, I have not.
Okay. Mr. Charlebois-Page, summary?
No, thank you.
Okay, then we will, having heard the evidence, we will conclude this matter and move on to the next matter on the list. Number 2 is 1070 Henderson Highway. That's a familiar sounding address.
Can I ask a quick question, if that's okay?
Certainly.
So, Mr. Applicant, did you say that there's two items on our agenda today that rebuttal does not apply to?
That is the case. On the document itself, it has all of the properties that it applies to, but I could just tell you what they are if you give me 1 second here. I think it's 84.
Item number 5 and item number 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
4 and 8. Did I hear that correctly?
5 and 8.
5 and 8. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. And Mr. Rattan, if you can move on, please, to 1070 Henderson Highway.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-3796, roll number 0203137850, property address 1070 Henderson Highway. The 2025 assessed value based on April 1, 2023 is $2,361,000. On page 2, I have the photographs for the subject property. It is at the intersection of Henderson and Robindale Avenue. The subject property has a kiosk and gas pump. Moving on to page number 6, I have the income stream that was used for assessing the subject property. The store area for kiosk is $16.85. We have a table rent at $43.03. For assessing it, we applied a vacancy loss of 2%, an expense of 3%, a shortfall at $6 per square feet. And then we applied a cap rate of 4.5%, which brings the capitalized value at $1,527,156. We have additional building, which includes tank, canopy, fuel pumps, which are worth $834,000 based on cost approach, and the total value from the total value of the subject property is $2,361,000. Moving back to page 5, I have the 3 rent comparables, similar to my last presentation. The average rent out is $43.40. And one of the rent comparables is my subject property itself, 1070 Henderson Highway, comparable number 2. Moving on to pages from page 10 to page 11, I have the income and expense meters that were submitted to us. And moving forward from page 12 to the end, I have the photographs from my rent comparables. So to conclude, I would ask the board to confirm 2025 assessed value at $2,361,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Charlebois Page, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I just confirm again that the value presented today was model generated?
Yes, that is right.
So the same 3 lease deals, I'll just ask you again, that rent at 1070 Henderson, knowing that it's for the entire property and all of the gas station canopy, all that, would you say that that is a net rent for the convenience store or a good indication?
I might have to I don't have the complete information right now how this rent was calculated by one of our teammates, so I can't. I wouldn't be able to comment anything on that right away. I might have.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Sorry to cut you off. Just for our conversation purposes, I divided that 84,000 figure by the convenience store, and that is that is where the $51.22 comes from.
Right.
But I guess just in knowing that that was for the entire rent for the entire site, would you say that that's a strong indication of market value for that convenience store?
That is right. Yeah.
Okay. So to your knowledge, no adjustments were made to any of those lease deals, right? The 3 lease deals you provided for the convenience stores?
No.
Okay. Again, this property has the 4.5% capitalization rate on the commercial store. Do you think this is in line with the market?
I think so. The cap rate is a bit below the market range. As I was talking earlier in my last presentation, it should be somewhere between 5.5 to 6%, and that would be remaining similar for all the rest of the presentation for gas stations.
And could I ask you, where did you get that revised figure, if you don't mind me asking?
I would that's according to what I have been analyzing them, or what I've been understanding about them, that they are less riskier properties as compared to other property types. So that's why I would say 5.5 to 6% is pretty good. Even our retail section, we start at 5.60, and the range goes up to 7%. So
and
even
then,
if I consider as a retail section, category property, the range is from 5.65 to 7%.
Yeah, so it's just interesting to me because for me, when I look at that chart on page 8, when it says regional, when you're talking about a regional shopping center, you're talking about the highest performing retail assets in the city, in terms of enclosed malls and power centers below that, certainly the outlet mall and all that. And then the brokers are indicating a range of between 6 and 7.5% between the 3 of them. It would I guess, but if we take everything from blue chip, like the outlet mall, and then we go all the way to non-investment grade as our spectrum of retail. You would say these would be in the low end of the range. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Yes.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Diamond?
Okay, so this property, the rent is that the model is chosen is 4303, but in fact, your comparable to is this property, which shows a rent in place of 5122. Is that correct?
That is right.
And you show that on page 4 as well as on page 5.
Sorry, I have the printed one, so.
Yeah, on page 4, you have the rent roll for that lease.
Yes, I have the rent page on page 4.
And Mr. Sean Page, when he was questioning you about that property on the previous one, called it an outlier. And do you agree that it's an outlier?
It is definitely an older lease. The lease started back in 1995, but again, these leases last for a longer period of time, like from 25 to 30 years is a normal length for these leases, and then they can be extended upon mutual agreements. So if we are calling it an outlier, just looking at their lease start and lease end date, then I won't agree to that statement. Because these leases are meant to be for a longer period of time.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's my questions.
I don't think I've got any questions with respect to this, and I should have probably led with this, but the rebuttal and the evidence that was provided with respect to the comparables can carry over to this property as well as all of the others as we had intended. Mr. Charlebois Page, your evidence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've got another owner-occupied gas station with a commercial store. The convenience store is 1,685 square feet. There's also additional infrastructure used with the gas station, which is valued on the cost approach. Myself and the assessment authority have taken this approach with mixed of income and cost. I don't dispute that. And the subject property site area is 18,472 square feet. Current assessment is $2,361,000 in the commercial class. Again, my income value starting there on page 12 of my report, PDF page, of course, I apologize. And this one here, I've also applied $35 to. I've got comparables in the chart for convenience stores alone, ranging from $24 to $33. And I've applied $35, which is the high end of the range given the age of the property. My vacancy shortfall and non-recoverable are 2%, $6 per square foot, and 3% respectively, and they are in line with the current assessment. In review of my capitalization rate, again, I looked at the top end of the range or I guess the top end of the quality range and bottom end of the cap rate range for retail assets in the city of Winnipeg, and I applied a 6.75 in this case. There is the additives here in the amount of $834,000 under adjustments, which is the cost stuff for the pumps and tanks. I'm not in dispute of that figure. My reconciliation of value is $1,622,000, and it's calculated there on in my income value summary. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Rattan, questions?
No, I don't have any.
Mr. Diamond, any questions?
Yeah, so Mr. Charlebois Page, the model has indicated a rent per square foot of 4303, when in fact the lease in place is a lot higher. And you've chosen that even lower rental of $35, correct?
Correct.
And, the only reason I'm bringing this up is yesterday one of your colleagues was before us, and we had the opposite situation where property wasn't performing as well as it should have, or as well as the model had it, and insisted that we use rents in place because that was what the property was actually doing. And here we have the opposite, where the property seems to be, from the landlord's point of view, doing a lot better than what the model suggests. And you're still suggesting that we go down and not use the rents, the actual circumstances or the actual financial circumstances. So basically, if the situation was reversed, would you be saying that, well, it should do what the model says?
Respectfully, the net rent of this property is not $51.22 for the convenience store. I would agree with my colleague who was on yesterday. When the net rent in place is relevant to the April 1st, 2023 valuation date, I think it's a strong indication of market value. In this case, $51.22 is not reflective of the convenience store rent. That was submitted in my rebuttal. We just went over it in the last property. $84,000 is what the owner paid for the entire site. And to apply that to just the convenience store is not reflective of a correct triple net rent for a convenience store. You can see that, I mean, this is the property that the rebuttal is circled around. There's $834,000 in additives. That should be adjusted out of the total rent paid for the site. So I believe my revised calculated rent in my rebuttal for this property was $33 and change. And I'm suggesting 35 based on the market comparable survey. To keep consistent with our approach, I would, and just maybe to give you my opinion on your statement, I certainly do not disagree, or sorry, I certainly do agree with the fact that a triple net rent for the subject property relevant to the April 1st, 2023 valuation date is a strong indication of market value. The $51 figure quoted, in my opinion, is not an indication of a triple net lease for a convenience store.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
And I have no questions. Any summary, Mr. Rattan?
No, I don't have it. Thank you.
Mr. Charlebois-Page, any summary?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Then we will conclude this matter, having heard the evidence, and move on to the next matter, which is the street address of 1947 Henderson Highway. Mr. Rattan, if you could please introduce that property and provide your evidence on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-2481, roll number 0400-120-1500, property address 1947 Henderson Highway. The 2025 assessed value based on April 1, 2023 is $2,716,000. Page 2 consists of the aerial photographs of the subject property. It's at the intersection of Henderson and Stroud Avenue. It has a gas pump and a convenience store. A kiosk and a vehicle car wash. So moving on to page 5, I have the income streams that were used to assess the subject property. The first income stream is associated to vehicle car wash, which is of 1,738 square feet. We have a table rent of $10.62, which brings the potential rent at $18,458. We applied a vacancy loss of 2%, an expense of 3%, and a shortfall at $6 per square feet, which brings the net operating income at $17,337. We applied an overall cap rate of 5.35%, which brings the capitalized value at $324,056. Moving on to page number 6, I have the second income approach, which was used for our kiosk section. The area for the kiosk is 450 square feet, which the model rent is at $204.67, brings a potential rent at $92,102. We applied a vacancy loss of 2%, an expense of 3%, and a shortfall at $6 per square feet, which brings the net operating income at $87,498. We applied an overall cap rate of 4.5%. The capitalized value is $1,944,400. And we have the additional building value at $448,000, which refers to the pumps, canopies. So bringing the total of this income approach at $2,392,000. When we club the stream 1 and stream 2 incomes, the total market value for the subject property comes at $2,716,000. While looking at my rent comparables, specifically for the KO section, I have 3 rent comparables whose area ranges from 101 square feet to 123 square feet. The mean from these comparable comes around $219.99. And when we look at my vehicle car wash comparables, I have 2 comparables with a mean rent of $11.75. Moving on to pages 10 and 11 have the income and expense meter that was submitted to us by the property by the accounting supervisor. And moving forward from page 14 to the end, I have photographs from my rent comparables. So to conclude, I would ask the board to maintain 2025 assessed value at $2,760,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Charlebois Page, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just confirm with you that the value presented today was model generated.
That is right.
So the 3 kiosk comparables, obviously recognizing that the subject property is quite small here, it's under 500 square feet, 450 is what I have it at. I'm noting that your 3 comparables are all less than a third of the size. Would you agree that economy of scales might dictate those rents could be lower?
Yes, that could be a case. Yes.
Okay. With respects to comparable 1 at 1883 Portage at $375, would you agree that that's an outlier compared to the other 2 comps provided?
I mean, that was provided to us by the lease, so I would suggest that shouldn't be an outlier because that information was provided to us on the income and expense meters.
But is it an outlier to comparable 2 and 3?
I mean, I wouldn't say it as an outlier.
Okay. With respects again to the cap rate study provided, won't go into it too detailed as we've already covered this. 4.5%. In your opinion, you've stated for all properties on this docket, they should be increased. Would you agree again here that the 4.5% cap rate provided is too low and too aggressive?
I would say it is low and it should be adjusted up. Yes.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much. My questions have been asked and answered.
Thank you. Mr. Diamond?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
My question, Mr. Rattan, again, with respect to the car wash and the kiosk, we've heard evidence on other properties that these operate as single economic units. There's different cap rates here. One, the car wash is at 5.35%, the kiosk at 4.5%. Your statement with respect to, or your evidence with respect to the cap rate on the kiosk to be adjusted upward to between 5.5 and 6%, is that going to be the same request with respect to the car wash, or what's your position on whether the cap rate for the car wash and the kiosk should be the same?
I would suggest that 5.5 to 6% should be only applied for the kiosk section of the income stream. And I would ask the board to keep the vehicle car wash at 5.35% cap rate.
Okay. What is it that is different about the car wash than the kiosk then?
I would suggest all the table rents that we have for our vehicle car washes are below the market, are approximately below the market rent, or are reflecting the market, and the cap rate derived for the vehicle car washes have been applied after analyzing these leases, like the specific category for the vehicle car wash itself. So I would suggest to keep the overall cap rate for the vehicle car wash at 5.35 cap rate.
Could I ask a follow-up question, Mr. Chair, if you're done with your line of questions?
Yes, I'm done. Yes, go ahead, ask a follow-up question.
So would this sell as one asset in your opinion, Mr. Assessor?
Sorry?
Would this transact on the market as under one cap rate as one asset?
It depends on the transaction type. It could depend, like, if somebody wants just to sell a vehicle car wash, they can sell it independently too. And it can be operated by another owner if they want to.
It's your opinion that they could separate those assets on all the properties we have today?
Yes, that is my opinion. That is my understanding. If somebody wants just to buy a vehicle car wash, they can buy it out. And then another person can run and operate the kiosk and the pump if they want to. That is my understanding.
If there's no front access, anyway, that regardless of that, I'll move on from that. And maybe just one more question for you. You said you reviewed the leases for the car washes, so the cap rate was fine. How maybe I'm missing the logic on that. How are you?
I haven't reviewed. That's something like the modeler in our department have reviewed, and they brought up the cap rate for 5.35% because they are the one who review the leases and generate the model generated cap rates.
Okay.
Because it's a model driven value, right? So it's not. I haven't reviewed or I haven't put any cap rates on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Your evidence, please, Mr. Charlebois Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have another owner-occupied gas station built in 1999. The convenience store on this is a small kiosk at 450 square feet, and the car wash is 1,738 square feet. In addition to that, there's the costed amounts for the gas pumps, tanks, and canopies. The site area is 1991 square feet, or sorry, 19,991 square feet. And the current assessment is 2,716,000 in the commercial class. Set aside the sales comparison approach using the income with components from the cost approach from Marshall Swift. Again, you'll recognize the study is not dissimilar from the previous properties. The only difference here is we'd be reliant on the small kiosk rents, which are comparables to 10, 11, 12, 13. You'll see them ranging from anywhere from I believe $80 to $159 a square foot for these assets under $500 a square foot. I'm applying a $125 rent to the 450 square foot kiosk. I'm not disputing the 1062 rent applied to the car wash. It's in line with the evidence we found for standalone car washes, the only lease deals we could find. My 2% vacancy allowance, $6 shortfall, and 3% non-recoverable are in line with the current assessment. My capitalization rate I've applied is again 6.75%. And this is in line with what we're seeing for sort of top quality retail in the city of Winnipeg. I'm not in dispute of the $448,000 in adjustments that have been applied. My reconciliation of value is $1,496,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Rattan?
No, I do not have any, Chair.
Mr. Diamond, questions?
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Seelan?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I do have some questions. The comparables that you have provided, and you indicated you were going to be relying on the comparables of 500 or smaller square footages. I'm looking at the other comparables that say C-store and car wash. The net rent per square foot, that's a blended rent, isn't it, for both the C-store and the car wash?
Correct.
Okay, so those, has any steps been taken to separate the car wash rent, assuming it's around the $9, $10, or $11 per square foot, to give a C-store only or convenience store only rent from those?
So where we could, we did. And if you'll see the comps 8, 9, 10, 4, you'll see they're noted as C-store only. The
Yes.
problem is that these leases are not typically split out. But if you'll look at my valuation, my summary, it has the blended rate, I guess, if you're interested in looking at that metric. So in this case, when you apply the 450 at 125 and the modeled rent of 1062 to the car wash, you're getting that blended rate of 3414. Flipping back up to that chart, that would put that in the higher end of those range of comps for the blended rates. But I would not suggest in this case to use those, Mr. Chair, because it's disingenuous, and this asset is 450 square feet. So really and truthfully, I think Mr. Diamond pointed out on the first property, sort of these small rents here, these kiosk style properties, should have a higher rent applied to them. And my 125, I feel like, is reflective of that small asset. So.
Okay, I was going to ask about the blended rent that you'd used here, but that's fine. You've answered that, and those are my questions. Thank you. Mr. Rattan, any summary required?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Charlebois-Page?
No, thank you, sir.
Okay, my intention was to deal with one more item and then take a short break, if that's okay with everybody, or does anyone need a break now?
I think we do one more.
Okay. In that case, item number 4 on the list, I think the address on my docket might be wrong. The address I have is 1123 Gateway for item number 4. Mr. Rattan, if you can please introduce that property and provide your evidence on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-2479. Roll number 0400-703-1900. Property address 1123 Gateway Road. The 2025 assessed value based on April 1, 2023 is $2,721,000. Moving on to page 2 and page 3, I have some photographs for the subject property. And moving on to page 6 and page 7, I have the income approaches that were used to assess the subject property. The first income approach was for KO section, which has leasable area of 1906 square feet with a table rent of $40.72, bringing the potential rent at $77,612. We applied a vacancy loss of 2%, expense rate of 3%, and a shortfall at $6 per square feet, which brings the net operating income at $73,549. We applied an overall cap rate of 4.85%. There are additional values to the property, which are worth $869,000, which are pumps, tanks, canopies, and these are valued at cost approach. Moving on to page 7, I have vehicle car wash income stream, which is 1843 square feet. We have a table rent applied at $10.48 with a potential rent of $19,315. The vacancy loss is 2%, expenses at 3%, and a shortfall at $6 per square feet. We applied a cap rate of 5.4%, which brings the estimated total value at $336,000. If we club the income stream 1 and 2, the total estimated subject property value is $2,721,000. Moving back to page 5, I have similar 3 rent comparables that were used earlier for KO section, which brings the average rent at $43.40, and vehicle car wash. Similar rent comparables, which bring the mean rent of at $11.75. Moving on to pages 12 to pages 15, I have the income and expense mailer that was submitted by accounting supervisor. And going forward, I have the photographs for the rent comparables. Thank you. To conclude, I would ask the board to maintain 2025 assessed value at $2,721,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Charlebois-Page, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'll just confirm this was a model generated value put forward today.
Yes, that is right.
Okay, I'll touch on it briefly because this will be the same for all the properties that are gas stations today. But again, in your opinion, I think you've stated before, you don't think that the $51.22 at 1070 Henderson is an outlier, and you're not concerned with the 1995 start date. Is that a fair statement?
That is true.
Okay, so again, this property has a 4.85% capitalization rate. You've sort of touched on this. That's a full point out of the range from your highest end retail in your cap rate study for the city, and it's almost 1.5% outside the range provided by the brokers, the people that sell these. Does that concern you?
Yes, to which I asked that could be adjusted a bit. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Diamond, questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Seelan, questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Again, my question, I'm looking at page 2 and 3, the photographs, specifically page 3. Page 3 to the right-hand side of the picture, that depicts the kiosk, the convenience store area, Mr.
Yes.
Rattan? And to the left is an attached car wash?
That is correct. Yes.
And your position with respect to differing cap rates on the car wash and the kiosk remains the same, that you're still maintaining that a separate capitalization rate should be used for each?
Not in this case, I would say, because in this case it's difficult to sell them differently because you have to be like it's one single unit, I would say.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I don't have anything further. Mr. Charles-Page, your evidence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So another owner-occupied gas station with commercial store and car wash built in 2006. The convenience store here is 1,906 square feet with the car wash at 1,843 square feet. Additional infrastructure for the gas station, valued on the cost approach. We have the current assessment at $2,721,000 in the commercial class. Same rental input chart begins page 12 in my PDF. Start with the car wash. I don't dispute the rent here. It's at $1,048 a square foot, which is in line with the only market rents we could find for car wash sites. For the convenience store, I reviewed the ones with C-stores only, and I've applied a $30 rent per square foot in this case, a little bit older than the last one, which was built in 2018. And the range of those comparables is $24 to $33. I've applied a 2% vacancy, $6 shortfall, and 3% non-recoverable, which is in line with the current assessment. The additives, I believe in this case, were $869,000, that cost approach value for the gas infrastructure. I'm not in dispute of those figures calculated through Marshall Swift. For my review of the cap rate on this, I've applied the lowest cap rates possible from my top quality retail section at 6.5. This asset's in a commercial hub and as such should be right there. So 6.5 is what I've applied, and my reconciliation of value would be 1,981,000 rounded downward. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Rattan?
I don't have any questions.
No. Okay. Mr. Seelan, questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Diamond?
I don't either, thank you.
And I don't have any questions. Mr. Rattan, any summary?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Charles-Page?
No need. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Then having heard the evidence, we will conclude this matter. And maybe now is a good time to take a 5-minute break. If we can all come back at 2:25, please. Thank you. We'll call this meeting back to order, please. And if we can turn to number 5 on the docket, the street address of 40 Lexington Park. Mr. Rattan, if you can please introduce the property and provide your evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-2361, roll number 0400714140, property address 40 Lexington Park. 2025 assessed value based on April 1, 2023 is $9,903,000. Moving on to page 2 and page 3, I have the subject photograph, pictures of subject property. It's an MPI. Moving on to page 6, I have the income approach that was used to assess the subject property. It has a total leasable area of 44,000 square feet, which generates a potential rent as $703,536. We applied a vacancy loss of 2%, an expense rate of 3%, a shortfall at $6 per square feet, which brings the net operating income at $663,501. We applied an overall cap rate of 6.7%, which brings the estimated total value for the subject property at $9,903,000. Moving back to page 5, I have some rent comparables for the subject property. Since this subject property has a bigger area of 44,000, I couldn't find such big comparables for them. So my comparable size was between 4,000 to 8,000 square feet. And the rent is between $16 to $22, which brings an average rent at $19.67 and a median at $21. Moving on to page 10 to 11, I have the income and expense meter that was filled out by the manager. And moving on to from pages 12 to the end, I have the photographs of my rent comparables. So to conclude, I would ask the board to maintain 2025 assessed value at $9,903,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Charlebois Page, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'll just confirm with you this is a model generated value put forward today.
Yes, that's true.
You've included 3 lease comps. All appear to be above grade space with no basement. Have you reviewed any basement leases?
No, I only reviewed these 3 leases for the subject property.
Okay, so my follow-up was, have you reviewed any office leases? But I think that would fall. Is that fair to say you would not have reviewed? Okay, fair. So one of your comparables, they're comparable. I think you've already noted in your presentation that all of these comps are pretty small, and you had issues finding anything bigger. But comparable 3 at 20 Lakewood Boulevard, do you think it's a good comparison? I believe that one's in an anchored shopping plaza. Is that, do you think that'd be a strong comparison to the subject property?
It is in a shopping mall, but again, the area is 8,000. The current use for this is as a vehicle service garage shop. So I think that would be a good comparable for the subject when compared to the subject property.
And so now the subject property, as I understand it, is half office space on the main floor, half vehicle service garage, and the basement portion is like finished area with breakout room, break rooms, bathrooms, janitor closet, mechanical. Do you think it's fit to compare just those 3 commercial garages to a property with that mix of asset?
Since to that extent, yes, and to that extent, no. So I would say, like, even if we let's say one of my comparables at 20 Lakewood Boulevard, it has all similar things. It has a small office for admin purposes, it has small break room for the employee for having lunches, and it has a vehicle service garage shop. Yeah, the area definitely is different because it's the total area for my comparable 3 is 8,000. On the other hand, it's 44,000. But again, if we look at our rent comparables and I do a blended rent on them, it comes at $15.98 for has them model generated rent for them. Whereas all the comparables have rent lying between $16 to $22.
Sure, but you'd have to agree that they'd be there. If there is office space in those, it'd be, under 1,000 square feet for sure. And whereas the subject property is more office and basement space than it is vehicle service garage.
Yes, that is very clear.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. My questions have all been answered.
Right. Mr. Diamond?
Yeah, so I see that you had difficulty finding comparables, so, but where did the model get the cap rate from?
So the model has generated the cap rate based on the vehicle service garages. Like they might have like analyzed all the vehicle service garages and then came up with a model. I only have that much knowledge for the cap rate because on the model because we are not told how the model is being run.
Okay.
So I won't be able to provide a lot of insight on that.
Yeah, because I'm looking at your page number 8, and I know it'd either be industrial, it'd be office, maybe, or whatever it is. You know, your lower cap rates are all in the 5s, and
Yes.
this is a very new property, and I'm just wondering, built in 2010, how it generated a cap rate of
I'm assuming
Seven.
I'm assuming the reason for a higher cap rate would be because of the space. It's 44,000 square feet leasable area. So I'm guessing it would be difficult to rent it out in the market. And that's why it has a higher cap rate. That would be my guess. But I don't have perfect knowledge for this or perfect answer for this one.
Okay, well, thank you for your answer, and that's my only question.
Thank you. I have a question, I guess, similar to what Mr. Diamond was asking. On the chart on page 8, and this address at 40 Lexington Park is more than half office space, I think you'd said. Is that where the cap rate is driven? Suburban A office space or suburban B office space? Or is it, you had mentioned there's a vehicle service or commercial vehicle service category in the model, but where would that fall in this chart? Or can you tell me that?
So it will be basically it's an office type property, so it should be falling under office type category, which would be suburban A or suburban B, lasting from 5.25 to 6.75. Again, these are like some kind of like typical properties in which we have different income streams and we don't have a subcategory in our cap rate study table. So it's kind of like difficult to say like in which segment because it has like all 3 kinds. Like it is an office, it has a warehouse section to it, because sorry, not warehouse, but a vehicle service garage section to it.
Right. Okay, thank you. Well, no, I do have another question. Vehicle service garage. Is there any service done here, or is this just an inspection, or do you know? Just an inspection unit.
No, I actually do not know. Out of my head, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further. Mr. Charlebois-Page, your evidence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the subject property is an owner-occupied mixed-use office and vehicle service garage built in 2010. Site or square footage is 44,000 square feet, broken down as follows: 14,813 square feet of office, 14,813 square feet of vehicle service, and the basement at 14,374. The current assessment is 9,903,000 in the commercial class. Set the cost approach and the sales comparison approach side, and focused in on the income approach. My rental inputs start on page 11. So for my approach, I tackled this as the asset for what it is. I reviewed office comparables from River East Transcona, the neighborhood that the subject property falls into. The range was 11 to 1813 a square foot. I applied $19 a square foot to the main floor office area, taking into consideration that the subject property is new and would be at the top end. Underneath is a study. These are citywide. There's not as many comparables available. Median was $16, but you'll see the range there. I went to $19 a square foot for the vehicle service garage component as well, as it was in the upper end of the range surveyed. And some of those comps would be obviously a lot smaller than the subject property. So then if you'll scroll down on the next page, I have basement comparables. These are finished spaces from professional outfits, which are like comparable 4, I assign the most weight to. It's a major 4 bank. It's a lease deal that splits out what finished basement would be worth. They assigned in that case, a rent to the 2nd story office, the primary branch, and then the finished basement space. So I've applied $6 a square foot to the basement. For the vacancy and shortfall and non-recoverable, again in line with the current assessed values for those assets. And then me and the assessor came in relatively, or me and the model, I guess I should say, came in close. I was at a 6.75 cap, and you know, the model I believe generated 6.7 for this property. So that again is coming from the range of I included an office capitalization rate study for this, with the property being half office on the main floor, and then the basement being your sort of typical like lunchroom for the employees, breakout, mechanical, that kind of stuff. I believed it more in line with that range. For us, that's between 6 and 8%. Obviously, the brokerage firms there are between 6 and 7.75. So the 6.7 modeled and the 6.75 applied by myself, I think is in line with that range. My reconciliation of value is at $9,064,000 rounded. That concludes my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rattan, any questions?
No, I do not have it.
Mr. Diamond?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Seelan?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I don't have any questions. Mr. Rattan, any need for a summary?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Charlebois-Page?
No, thank you.
Then, having heard the evidence, we will conclude this matter and move on to number 6 on the docket. That is the street address of 3357 Pembina Highway. If you can please, Mr. Rattan, introduce the property and provide your evidence with respect to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-2490, roll number 0309166080, property address 3357 Pembina Highway. 2025 assessed value based on April 1, 2023 is $3,545,000. Moving on to the subject property, I have some photographs of the subject property on page 2 and page 3. It is at the intersection of Grandmont Boulevard and Pembina Highway. Moving on to the page 6, I have the income streams. Page 6 and page 7 have the income streams for the subject property. The first income stream is for kiosk with pumps. It is 2957 leasable area with a table rent of $41.59, which generate a potential rent of $122,982. We applied a vacancy loss of 2%, expense rate of 3%, and a shortfall at $6 per square feet, which brings the net operating income at $116,551. We applied an overall cap rate of 5.10%. which brings the capitalized value at $2,285,314. There are additional building values of $787,000, which consist of tanks, canopies, fuel pumps, which bring the estimated value at $3,072,000. The second income stream is for vehicle car wash with a leasable area of 2,615 square feet with a table rent of $10.79. generating a potential rent of $28,216. We applied a vacancy loss of 2%, expenses at 3%, and a shortfall at $6 per square feet. The net operating income after above deduction is $26,508. The overall cap rate for this income stream was 5.6%, which brings the estimated value at $473,000. When we combine income stream value 1 and income stream 2, the overall value for the subject property comes at $3,545,000. Moving back to page 5, I have the rent comparables. These are the same set of comparables that were used earlier. The average rent for my SKP income approach, SKP income approach is $43.40. And for vehicle car wash, it's $11.75. Moving on to pages 11 to 15, I have the income and expense measure that was provided to city. And from pages 16 to the end, I have the photographs for the rent comparables. So to conclude, I would ask the board to maintain 2025 assessed value at $3,545,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois Page. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just confirm again, this is a model generated value.
That is true.
I guess it's the same 3 lease deals. We've gone over that. I believe that the 1070 Henderson deal should be more like $33 a square foot netted. You've stated that you don't think that the $51 rent is an outlier, and you're not concerned with the 1995 start lease sign date, which is that all true?
That is true.
On this one, it's got the 5.1% capitalization rate on the commercial store. Again, do you believe that's in line with the market? Or I think you've stated previous that'd be low or too aggressive.
Yes, that's right.
I guess you're doing it on a case by case basis, but given a look at the overhead here, it's operating as one business unit. My opinion is that it's sell as one asset. Do you think that there should be a different cap between the car wash stream and the gas station and convenience store?
For this one, no, it should be similar as according to me.
Okay.
We should
So then again, just one last note is that I think, the brokerage firms are sort of indicating that there's a 6 to 7.5% range on commercial assets, and your current cap's at 5.1. What do you think is an appropriate cap for a property like this?
I would suggest it should be somewhere between 5.5 to 6%.
Okay. And what is that based on in terms of that chart? I guess for me, I'm looking at it here, and for like regional, your top end regional assets, you have here 5.85 to 6.8 sort of range. Do you think this is you would say it's an outlier then, I guess, in your opinion?
So I was suggesting a range of between 5.5 to 6%, which comes between 5.85 to 6.58.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Diamond, questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Seelan?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I have no questions. Mr. Charlebois Page, your evidence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have another owner-occupied gas station built in 2008. Convenience store is 2,957 square feet, and a car wash that's 2,615 square feet. It's got the gas pumps and canopies valued on the cost approach. The current assessment is $3,545,000. Set aside the sales comparison and the cost approach, with, I guess, with the exception of the Marshall Swift stuff. Same rent comparable chart ranging between $20 to $33 for a convenience store. I know the board had some concerns with the size of these earlier. This convenience store is almost 3,000 square feet. I think the $35 rent I've applied here is fair and conservative given that size and the rent range for other commercial tenancies. I'm not disputing the 1079 rent applied to the car wash. Again, it's within the range of the evidence I was able to find for car wash sites. I've applied 2% vacancy, $6 shortfall, and 3% non-recoverable, which is in line with the current assessment. My capitalization rate that I've applied is 6.75%. Again, this one's a little bit older than property 2 ago. Been consistent in my range between 6.5 to 6.75, and that's relying on top performing retail assets and the sales that we've calculated in my attached study. 787,000 is the amount for the adjustments, the gas canopy infrastructure. I'm not in dispute of that figure. My reconciliation of value is 2,703,000 rounded downward. That concludes my evidence.
Thank you. Mr. Rattan, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have it.
Mr. Seelan, questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Diamond?
I have no questions, thank you.
I will follow along. I have no questions. Summary, Mr. Rattan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm good.
Mr. Charlebois Page?
Nothing on my end, Mr. Chair.
Then, having heard the evidence, we will conclude this matter and move to the next item on the list, that being item number 7, street address of 885 Waverly Street. If you could please introduce the property and provide your evidence, Mr. Rattan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-2500, roll number 10000005200, property address 885 Waverly Street. 2025 assessed value based on April 1, 2023 is $2,660,000. Moving on to page 2 and page 3, I have the photographs for the subject property. Moving on to page 6 and page 7, I have the income approaches that were used to assess the subject property. The first income approach is for vehicle car wash. It's a 1,200 square feet area with a table rent of $11.72, with a potential rent bringing up at $40,064. We applied a vacancy loss of 2%, an expense at 3%, and a shortfall at $6 per square feet, which brings a net operating income at $13,226. We applied an overall cap rate of 5.05%, which brings the total estimated value at $262,000. The next income approach is for store kiosk, which is 2,534 square feet area with a table rent of $42.53, which brings a potential rent of $107,771. We applied a vacancy loss of 2%, an expense rate of 3%, a shortfall at $6 per square feet, which brings the net operating income at $102,144. We applied an overall cap rate of 4.95%. There are some additional building value of $334,000, which includes tanks, pumps, canopy, and the estimated value is $2,398,000. Moving back to page 4, I have the rent comparables, which were the same set that were used earlier. The average rent for my rent comparable is $43.40, and the vehicle car wash is $11.75. Moving onward from pages 11 to the end, we have the income and expense mirror that was filled out by the property owner and the pictures of my rent comparables. So to conclude, I would ask the board to maintain 2025 assessed value at $2,660,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Charlebois Page?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will try and be fast, as this is eerily similar to the last few. So it's a model generated value, just to confirm.
That's right.
We've gone over that rent deal at 1070 Henderson. You don't believe it's an outlier, and you're not concerned with it being signed in 1995. Can I just confirm those with you?
Yes, that's right.
Cap rates 495 and 505 on this. Just to confirm, this operating as one business unit, you think these would be selling under 2 different cap rates?
No, this should be under one. So
Okay. And I'll just confirm with you again, 495 to 505 is outside the range for both the Alta study and the brokers. And to be frank, outside of the city range as well. Just to confirm with you again, you've said before you believe these are low and too aggressive. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much.
Mr. Diamond?
I have no questions, thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Rattan. The pictures that you have are of a Husky station. In 2002, this was sold to Co-op, and I see there's a registration date of September 14th, 2022 for $3,452,000. Did you investigate that sale, or was this arm's length, or was this part of a accumulation sale, or can you comment on that?
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to look into the sale, which I should have, but I wasn't able to.
Mr. Sheehan, Mr. Chairman, I can indicate that I happen to know that all the
Okay.
Husky stations in Winnipeg were taken over by co-op.
Okay, yeah, I was pretty sure of that myself, but I wanted to know if this was a separate one, or if it was part and parcel, if the 3 million was just related to this sale, or if it included other properties as well. But I guess my other questions will remain unanswered at this point, or unasked. Thank you, Mr. Charlebois-Page. Your evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a owner-occupied gas station with a commercial store built in 2010. It's got the commercial store at 2,534 square feet and the car wash, which is 1,200 square feet. There's also the infrastructure associated with gas pumps, tanks, and gas station. Subject property site area is 32,659, and the current assessment is 2,660,000, the commercial class. I will move forward with my income value. That starts on page 12. This is going to be the same idea. The C-store range for me is $20 to $33. Given the age of the subject property, I've applied 35 at the top end of the range for myself. For the car wash itself, the current rent is at $11.72, and again, that's within the range of the rents reviewed, and it's a little bit smaller than some of the other car washes, so I don't dispute that figure. The vacancy shortfall and non-recoverable are 2%, $6, and 3%, and are in line with the current assessment. For myself, I reviewed the top quality retail range within the city of Winnipeg and the sales that were available, and applied a 6.5 at the bottom end of that range in this case, given the age and location. I'm not disputing the $334,000 in assessment that's listed under adjustments, and that's applied through the cost approach. My reconciliation of value is $1,830,000. And just before I conclude, I will just add some commentary to a question that was brought up. As these sales, to my knowledge, that was a portfolio sale. I believe Mr. Diamond mentioned it, that all of the business operations were purchased and will be non-arm's length. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rattan. Questions, please.
No, I don't have any. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Diamond.
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Seelan.
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
And I think my questions have been addressed. Yes, thank you. We'll move then on to the last item on the list today, that being street address of 84 Scurfield. Mr. Rattan, if you could please introduce the property and give us your evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-1585. Roll number is 030651602000. Property address 84 Scurfield Boulevard. 2025 assessed value based on April 1, 2023 is $3,223,000. Page 2 and page 3 have the photographs for the subject property. It's at the intersection of Scurfield and Overcourt Drive. Moving on to page 6, I have the income approach which was used to assess the subject property. It's 15,906 square feet area with a table rent of $14.41, which brings the potential rent at $229,205. We applied our vacancy loss of 2%, an expense rate of 3%, a shortfall at $6 per square feet, which brings the net operating income at $215,973. We applied an overall cap rate of 6.7%. which brings the total value at $3,223,000. Moving back to page 5, I have the rent comparables that were used earlier for my vehicle service garage shops. The average rent from these comparables are $19.67. Moving on forward from pages 10 to 11 are the income and expense meter that was submitted to us by the property owners. I'm moving from pages 12 to the end. I have the forecast for my rent comparables. So to conclude, I would ask the board to maintain 2025 assessed value at $3,223,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Charles Page?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll confirm with you that the value presented today was model generated.
That is correct.
There's a lease deal in place at the subject property signed February 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2024 at a rate of $11.92 a square foot. Are you concerned that your rental analysis that's citywide is, not almost double that, but substantially larger than that?
Sorry, where are we for the $11.92? I didn't catch that.
Okay, so the subject property has a lease deal in place
Yes,
at $11.92 a square foot. Your rental analysis has 3 properties from the city, a citywide study. They're in different neighborhoods, showing $21 a square foot. Are you concerned with your comparables being far in excess of the actual rent in place?
Unfortunately, I'm not able to understand where are we getting that 1192. Right?
The subject property lease.
But can you please refer to the page that you're looking at for 1192?
It's page 4 of your brief.
Page 4 of your brief. Yeah, so I've calculated it out, right? You have just the monthly rent in the leased area there. I'm just that lease deal is signed in the latest charge date, the latest renewal date is February 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2024. So it's a 5-year term renewal right over the valuation date. And the rate per square foot is $11.92 per square foot.
The income and expense meter that I have presented on my brief in page 4, the lease chart was back in 1 November of 2006.
So if you knew that renewed in 2019 at $11.92 a square foot, would you say that's a strong indicator of market value?
We do not have that information with us, unfortunately. We were
Okay.
So back in like 20, so when they were supposed to submit us an income and expense meter, this was the information that was submitted to us.
Okay, thank you. And did you review any lease deals on Scurfield in the immediate vicinity?
No, I did not. And that.
Okay. Many of your comparables, or 2 of them, sorry, I shouldn't say many, 2 of them are under 1/3 of the size and one of them's less than half the size. Would you think that would affect the rate on an economy of scales basis?
Yes, it could affect.
Okay. So comparable 3 again is located in a anchored shopping center at 20 Lakewood Boulevard. Would you consider that to be superior than the subject property?
For the location wise, yes.
Okay. And those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Diamond, questions?
Yes, I see a gain on this property, which is again newer. You've got a cap rate of 6.7%. Can you tell me where the model got that rate?
So I would suggest that it would fall somewhere under like in a suburban A or a suburban B section, 5.25 to 6.75. Again, these are like they have like they have the components of multi-type properties. These are like they have office sections, they have a vehicle service garage option. So I would suggest it should be it's a standalone property, so somewhere in the office section ranging from 5.25 to 6.75.
There's quite a discrepancy between the two, but okay, that's the best you can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Rattan, I'm just looking at both your page 4 that has the subject property lease that's shown that started lease start 2008, lease end 2024. And I'm looking at the income and expense mailer as well from the 12 months ending December 31st, 2022. And no matter how I calculate it, I come up with a net rent of $11.92 per square foot for the total area. That would be the actual lease in place for this property, would it not?
Yes, it would be, but it was signed back in 2008. So that wouldn't be, so it's such a long lease, it wouldn't be like, I would say relevant to be included in our analysis. So it's more than like, let's say 16-year lease for such property type.
Okay, so you're not putting any weight on the actual lease in place then is what, is that fair to say?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Then I don't have anything further. Mr. Charlebois-Page, your evidence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's subject property is currently occupied with a commercial auto body and glass repair business. It was built in 1988. Building has one single tenant at 15,906 square feet. Subject site area is 43,560 square feet. Current assessment, $3,223,000 in the commercial class. Set aside the sales comparison approach and the cost approach to focus on the income. On this property, I gave my most weight to the renewed lease deal in place, renewed at February 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2024 at a rate of $11.92. To further check that lease, I surveyed the market in the immediate vicinity to ensure that that made sense, given the old lease deal, to make sure that that was relevant to other tenancies in the immediate vicinity on Scurfield. You'll see a chart there with 9 comparables in the direct and immediate vicinity on the same street with the same sort of economic factors. That range is between call it $9 and $12.50. The subject property would fall right in that range at $11.92. I'm not relying on the median or average, just checking to see if that lease deal is relevant. In my opinion, it is. I've applied 2% vacancy, $6 shortfall, and 3% non-recoverable in line with the current assessment. For this property, I reviewed the cap rate study that I've attached, and I applied a 7% in this case, consistent with my application on this docket. This one's a little bit older, 1988 build, and I put it up at the 7%. So my reconciliation of value, just pull it up here, is at $2,547,000 rounded, and this concludes my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Rattan?
No, I don't have any. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Seelan, have you any questions?
Yes, your fair market rent on page 11. These locations, are these auto body shops, or are these just warehouses?
No, the auto body analysis that I was able to put together is citywide. For me, with the lease deal in place for this type of tenancy, it was more important for me to ensure that in that immediate area, this was a relevant lease deal if you wanted to open your business, let's say, in that same economic area. So for me, that's what I focused on to check the barometer of the actual lease in place.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Diamond, questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
And I don't have any questions that haven't been addressed. Thank you very much. Mr. Rattan, any summary?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Charlebois-Page.
Mr. Chair, I will take summary, and it's just to do broadly speaking with some of the issues we brought up today and talked about. And for me, the model, both with the rent and the capitalization rate has been inconsistent. We can see over this docket, these assets are under one heading of vehicle service garage. And the model has inaccurately spit out, in my opinion, too aggressive cap rates and aggressive rental rates for convenience stores. I know we talked about my rebuttal at the top of this docket, but I just do want to refresh that when you are mixing the cost approach and income approach, it's unfair to sort of without netting those lease deals, to apply that all to the convenience store is disingenuous to what the lease is. So I'd ask the board to review these cap rates and look at what the people even selling them are at. I know the city and Altus have a bit of a gap there, but look at the brokerage information and see that, you know, that range is between sort of 6 and 7.5% there from them. So just ask the board to look at these aggressive rents applied to these convenience stores and the capitalization rates that are off the charts. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Then, having heard the evidence, we will conclude this matter. And I believe that is now all the matters on the docket have been heard, and we will adjourn this hearing. Thank you, Mr. Rattan. Thank you, Mr. Charlebois-Page, for your presentations. We will deliberate at the close of business here, and you will receive our decision shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. See you.